Click. Theologically, I can see that God is all-powerful, that we're small, insignificant. Go ahead. Darius, you got to keep up here. Meteorologically, da-da-da-da. Go on. Holmes, after giving Watson, after giving all this, says, why, Holmes? What does it tell you? And Holmes says, after being silent for a moment, someone's stolen our tent. All right. Well, that was a little tough pulling it all out there, trying to sync my voice with the animation. What do you think is the outcome of that somebody has stolen our tent? That Watson was unable to see the obvious. Is it possible that Watson's brain was a violation of the Crapper principle? I mean, at any point in time, maybe astrological, horological, theological, and meteorological information is important. But in this particular situation, out on a camping trip, the only thing that was important was a little bit of common sense. So we have to be very careful about building huge piles of crap, violation of the Crapper principle, and not instead focusing on that little amount that really can provide the answers and improve productivity. The attic is only so big. Now we're going to move on to another aspect of the collect side, and it's depicted in this picture that we call defining the books of knowledge, the how and the why. And here are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. What type of knowledge is needed to do your work? Go ahead, Darius. I'll keep up with you. Who provides it? Where do you get it? How does it arrive? What do you do? How do you add value? What are the critical issues? What happens when you're finished? How can the knowledge flow be improved? I can't read, it's under my own picture. What is preventing you from doing more, better, and faster? And what would make your work easier? And who do you go to when there's a problem? These are the kinds of issues that we need to address in communities of practice. This is the kind of codified knowledge that needs to be in the collect side of the connect and collect model, the end game. A good exercise would be to take each of you to think about your own respective jobs and attempt to answer some of those questions. Now, most people are able to do that, but they generally do it at way too high of a level. That's because if you've been in your job for a while, most of your knowledge to do that job is tacit knowledge. It's in your head. And if I asked you those questions, you're always saying, well, it's right here in my head. But you almost have to visualize yourself being at your job right up until Friday afternoon, and then Friday afternoon you get up and go on a vacation. And I'm doing this for effect here. On Monday morning, somebody else comes and sits in that chair. And they don't have all that tacit knowledge in their head. How are they going to come up to competency in the shortest possible time? How is their ultimate level of competency going to be even higher than what yours was? And those are the issues that we deal with in knowledge management. In the next diagram, we're going to show a model that depicts the connect and collect scenario. I'm going to do it very quickly. The character is one who's asking for some knowledge. And the role in the future is that that character has two possible ways of uncovering the knowledge he or she needs to get the job done most effectively. The first thing they ought to do is to go to the knowledge base. And they answer the question, Darius, do we already know this? In other words, rather than going and talking to the people in your organization and taking their time and energy, most of the questions, not certainly all, should be addressed in some form of a knowledge base and readily available. And the responsibility of the individual is to go first to the knowledge base. But if the knowledge is not in the knowledge base, then they need to have some method of uncovering the people who can answer their question. In other words, who can I ask for help? And in that community of folks up in the top part of this little green box will be some people who can no doubt help that person. And because this is a community, one that has built a trusting relationship amongst the participants, they'll be more than happy to help that person. Now, in today's economy, there are two types of knowledge management that are going on. Some of them focus on the communities, and some of them focus on building repositories down on the bottom. What needs to happen, it needs to be a balance of connect and collect. And if you go to the knowledge base and it's not there, then you need to go to your community. And when you go to your community, your problem is hopefully going to be solved. But you don't end it by just saying, well, thank you, and moving on to the next day. We need to also put in place an apparatus, a system for harvesting that knowledge and getting it back into the knowledge base, so that tomorrow, yesterday's toughest problems become tomorrow's common knowledge. And that's the role of connect and collect. And that's where it's all heading. There has to be a balance between having repositories of very useful knowledge that handle most of the kinds of difficult problems that people need to solve, but also communities that can solve the remaining problems and go on and invent new knowledge that we couldn't have anticipated a year ago or 5 years ago. But whenever the community spends their time and energy to solve problems, we need to harvest it, not let it be stuck in somebody's file drawer, never to be seen again. Because if it's stuck in somebody's file drawer, never to be seen again, that means tomorrow somebody else could have the same kind of problem. And that community will invest its time and energy answering the same old problem over again. And that is a waste of time and energy, and a demotivator as well. So that's the basic model of connect and collect. And if you have an environment that's totally on one end of it, and there are situations that would be justified on one end of it. Let's think of a nuclear reactor plant, and you're just about to have a meltdown. There's no time to go ask your community, what do I do now? There better be a checklist right on the wall that says when the buzzer goes off, here's the 3 things you do immediately. That's a community that's totally on the collect side. Checklists and instantaneous response, some of it could even be codified in software. Press this button and the computer will take over and do something. The other extreme are ad hoc communities, where they're involved in things that have seldom, if ever, been done before, certainly not in their own environment, where almost everything they need to solve is solved by people getting together and coming up with solutions. And if it's not going to happen again in this company ever again, it is truly ad hoc, then of course there wouldn't be much merit to collecting all of what they came up with. It was to solve a one-time problem, and we move on. So at the one extreme are totally ad hoc environments. You need to optimize people finding the right people to talk with. And if what they're uncovering is innovative type of a way of doing business, then maybe it's not clearly the subject matter experts you're tying into. Maybe it's people who are very good at thinking outside the box. So I'm not going to define for you the kind of person you need to find. In some cases, it will clearly be a subject matter expert. In other cases, it might be people who are able to think outside the box. And the other extreme is the totally collect environment, where it better already be codified or automated. We don't have time to go find out from somebody how to solve this problem. When the klaxon goes off and the nuclear reactor is starting to melt down, you better know the 3 buttons you need to press. But everything else is someplace in between. That's why I say there's an infinite variety of connect and collect. And some authors say, well, there's 4 types of communities or 5 or 6 types of communities. I say, well, quite frankly, there's an infinite variety. And don't hold yourself down to try to map yourself into one community or another. You're on this end of the spectrum, or someplace here, or maybe up in the middle, or over there. There's no such thing as just 3 or 4 types of communities, if you understand the concept of a full spectrum. On my next slide, which you do not have, it starts off this way, picture of a doctor's office. I didn't want to give it to you because I hate to give you the jokes before I tell them, because then you'll laugh and you won't laugh when I tell them. Of course, in this environment, I don't always hear the laugh anyway, but in any event, a man rushed into a doctor's office and shouted, "Doctor, I think I'm shrinking." The doctor calmly responded, "Now settle down. You'll have to be a little patient." I think I'm shrinking. All right, very good.
It's something.
I know it's getting late at night there, right? But the moral of that story was we're going to talk a little bit about personal KM, but you're going to have to be a little patient. We have 1 or 2 more subjects to talk about first. And the subjects are ones that should be very important to you, and that is the rationale for doing KM.